very valuable when I'm meeting buyers and sellers too. When you're getting prepared to sell someone's house, looking at a home obviously with different eyes than your buyer or your seller. And when you're coming up with a listing, trying to see, first of all, is it FHA, is it VA, you got to paint, you got to get enough roof, knowing what you're looking at. And of course, with buyers, it's been extremely helpful, not only with the buyers that are referred to me, but with cold leads and stuff, meeting people, sharing this knowledge about homes freely is what's making me really build trust with them on a short time frame. So as I walk through a house, I think one of the values of this too is not just showing your expertise as a real estate agent, getting the trust of your buyers and sellers, but also during your inspections and stuff, things tend to keep together a little easier because you've diagnosed the home to a certain visual degree, right? When the inspector comes and says, hey, this HVAC's working fine, but it's 30 years old, the buyers already knows that. If the roof's on its way out, or it's got 4 or 5 years left life on it, they already know. So they've already negotiated, they've already gone into the home, they've already gone to first treatment, eyes wide open. Therefore, not everything's a complete revelation on the inspection report, which tends to help keep deals together, right? Then that, of course, the inspector going there and telling them all these things about the house, right? Now, we've all, especially there's a lot of experienced agents in this room, we've all been the recipient of a buyer giving us an inspection report where it's like, well, this shit was evident. Like, the HVAC is 30 years old. You should have known that. Like, why all of a sudden, this is coming up now? So we have taken agents like yourselves on trips around the metro, going through older homes, and kind of it's a little easier sometimes to absorb the information if you're there on site, you know what you're looking at, things like that. So if that's something anybody wants to do, we've done it in the other markets for those guys that are tuning in. I come up there and we've done it in Cedar Valley and we've done it in Quad Cities as well. So there we go. Now I always park in the street when I show a house. I think there's a safety reason for that as well. But one of the reasons is I like to walk up on the home. I get a good look at the roof. Might be difficult in days like today when there's snow on it, of course. But we're going up to the roof and we're trying to figure out what type of roof and giving them some idea of how many years it has left on it, right? There's really two, well, there's all types of roofs that you see in Des Moines, but the two prevalent types are your single tab shingles, which is illustrated up here on the right. And then, of course, you have, I'll go to the next one, you have a 3-tab architectural laminate that people are putting on now. When you're looking at the single tab, just know they commonly last about 20 years. You don't see people putting roofs like this on today, generally. You certainly can, but they don't have as much life. Most people are doing the 3-tab architectural laminate shingles. But when you're looking at the roof, you'll notice areas that are patched, like down the left here. The middle one showing where, and it's a little easier to see the wear on a single tab than it is some of the 3-tab laminate. But you'll start to see that middle bottom one there when the shingles start to curl. You're on the last leg of your roof. And then, of course, obviously, the bottom right, something that is completely worn and should have been replaced probably 5 to 8 years before it got to that point. Okay? But if you're looking at roofs and you're trying to figure out how much life it has, there's just the granule on the roof is a telltale, how much granule is left on the shingle, but also is it curling. But if you start to see it curl and cup, it's on its way out, right? These are things you should bring up to your buyer so they know. This is what you're seeing more now of is the top right, right? These are 30-year shingles as at minimum. They do have 40 to 50-year shingles with that, and the difference is the mill, like the thickness of it. Some of them are hail rated, where if you actually have proof of that, it can lower your insurance and things like that. So you can't tell from a visual, at least I can't, the mill of the shingle. But I am looking for layers. Is it single layer? Is it layered over a bad shingle? Is it, you see up to 3 layers sometimes. And it's important to know that should there be more than 1 layer, it voids the warranty on the roof. Right? So if they had it professionally done and they went over that missing layer, that roof shingle is not warranted. It doesn't mean it won't last you 25, 30 years. It's not warranted, should it not.
Will insurance still take care of it if it's multiple layers?
Well, if it was like a hail damage or something like that, that's different than the shingle having a defect in it. And there being a defect in the product when you're trying to go back and say, hey, there's a malfunction. They won't warrant it at that point. It'll also shorten the life expectancy of the new shingles that you put on. For something that's a 20-year single tab, if you go over it, you might get 15 years. You know?
So you think with multiple layers, insurance will take care of it?
Correct. Correct.
I think a warranty is different than an insurance claim.
It is. It is. And yeah, you're talking about the warranty of the product of the shingles themselves. They would not be warranted. Yep. Not the insurance. Okay.
How many times do you see like multiple layers?
Quite a bit.
Or,
All the time. Quite a bit.
like I guess nowadays, like everybody's probably got a new roof by now.
Yeah,
A lot
about
of people have
hail and
insurance
stuff.
claims,
Yeah,
so-
but it's important to look. You know, there's a certain thing called weight to shingles. When you start to get snow, like we do, and get one of those blizzard conditions where there's a foot of snow. It's a lot of weight on your roof. You're not supposed to have that much weight. Those trusses and those beams in your house are rated for so much weight. So you start to get those shingles. If you ever pick one of a bundle up,
Oh yeah,
they're
for
not
sure.
light. So I mean, to have that much weight on your roof, and I've seen them up to 3 to 4 layers. In fact, one of the houses I bought, it had a metal channel on the outside, so you couldn't even see it till you picked it up. Then it was like bent it back. There was 3 layers. Yeah, it's horrible. Wood shake is something you don't see a lot of, but you do see it. In fact, the Country Club Clive. Anybody ever sell houses in the Country Club Clive? It was part of the HOA to have a wood shingle there. Now they let you replace it with like a composite or a cement that has that look. But these right here, they actually last about 50 years. They last a long time, but they're very, very expensive to replace. In fact, most people will not replace this roof in its entirety. They'll patch sections over time. Last bid I had was, and this was back in COVID, like 2020, maybe 2021, was a 14, no, it was earlier than that, 2018. It was a 1,400 square foot ranch. The bid to replace that roof at that time was like 45 grand. The entire roof. Yeah, with the wood shake. So they ended up replacing the roof, but actually did new OSB board. The wood shake is done on lap, underlay. It's like a lap. So when they come in, they have to put all new OSB board into the asphalt, which is still considerably less than the wood shake. The same thing goes for clay tile. You'll see some clay tile in our area. Those are typically replaced in sections. You'll have a roofer go up there and replace all the cracked ones. Very, very expensive to replace all at one time. And I've never had a clay tile roof replaced. Maybe someone here that's been doing this longer than me can speak to that. Yeah. Anybody, Sonny, you ever had one done?
I've never done one.
Barry, you haven't had one done in your illustrious 50-year career?
Nope.
All right.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. Supposed to be talking about pricing in 1983. It was so relevant today, right?
I love you too, man.
And then you will see rubber roofs. You will see flat roofs. In fact, it's good to know that there's a certain pitch on a roof you have to have for an asphalt shingle to work. John, my brother John, he lived in this area of like California ranches for a long time. And a lot of people took those rubber roofs off. They had rock on them and stuff, and they put asphalt shingle on. Well, remember what happened with a lot of those houses? A lot of mold from the inside out. The asphalt shingle sheds water, but it doesn't have enough pitch. That water will, in snow, will creep its way back up underneath the shingle, and you have all sorts of problems. So you have to have a certain pitch. I don't know what that is. You'll see this a lot on additions to places that where the roof line is very almost, it's not flat, but it's just slightly pitched, but they have asphalt shingles on them. No, you need this. You know, roll rubber membrane, some type. Okay. You'll see people paint these or put some kind of reflective white on them because the black absorbs the sun and wears them out a little earlier. These only last about 10 to 15 years, you know. So they have to be replaced and inspected more often. Okay. Move to foundations. I should be able to drop any one of you into a house and just by the foundation and the basement alone, be able to give you an approximate the decade that that home was built. Okay, if you can't do that, if I can't blindfold you, drop you into a home, you tell me it was built in 40s, the 20s, or even before 1900, I would say you need to train yourself up a little bit more. Okay, there's certain materials and there's certain things that happen in those areas that will be telltale signs of when it was built. Okay, one of them is the foundation. See, you won't see very many stone foundations in Des Moines. For my people in the Quad Cities, you see them all over the place. Their homes usually built before 1900. Okay, you will see these in farmhouses in our area. Doug, you see these in Palo at all? I know they get a little older.
Limestone foundations are fairly common in old houses like that, yes.
Yeah. And it's crazy how some of them have maintained them and just, they're beautifully straight, especially in the Quad Cities. Like, wow, like this thing's 120 years old and it still looks fantastic. I wouldn't go into one of these thinking it's going to be the most water retardant basement in the world. But like any basement, we're looking for straightness. We're looking for, fitting in, building out, shearing off the bottom, right? So yeah, these stone foundations are definitely the oldest. A lot of times they'll even accompany dirt force. Moving up in the early 1900s to about 1930, you see brick. And these tend to get water as well. They tend to get water as well. We can chuck point them, we can beam them. You can see even here, if you look really close at the photos, they have some kind of anchored system in to brace the wall. Chuck pointing them, painting them with special paint can really help. Dehumidifiers, things like that. As you can see, actually from the photo here is the brick foundation, but they're putting in a water retention system with some type of vapor barrier here. Okay. Now, as you move on through the 20s into the 40s and the 50s, you start to see clay tile. Now, what I understand about clay tile is they're made in fire. They're fire casted. There's less shrinkage with the clay tile versus brick, or even what came after this is the concrete block. Okay. You will see these actually all the way through the 60s. It kept through the 60s. The area we're in here in Windsor Heights is a prime example of clay tile used through the 60s. Okay. But after the 50s, they came up with something else that they still use sometimes today is the concrete block. I say that you'll see concrete block used commercially a lot, and you'll also see it with additions. Sometimes they use this concrete block. So they do have, I've got an illustration here where it's a facing. I've got an illustration here where you see that step cracking in the mortar a lot. That you'll see. But with any basement that you're looking at for your client, you're just looking down the wall to see if it's straight. Moving in this way, it's going in that way, it's shearing off the bottom. Those are all signs to be looking for. The step cracking is somewhat normal. Okay, if you see cracking go through the concrete block, we know we have some abnormal pressure in that area that probably needs to be looked at. All right, the concrete block in the 1950s, the early 1950s has re-rod coming up through it, which you see here. Does that make sense? They got away from that with the concrete block in the 60s and the 70s. They are in the, I should say, the 60s primarily. They stopped putting the re-rod in. They started putting those pilasters in. You ever see those little bump outs in the concrete block every 12 feet? Those are your worst foundations. Okay, out of probably all of them that we just went over today, exception of maybe the stone, that's probably your worst foundation because there's not enough support there. In fact, they started figuring that out in the course of making these, and they went back to the re-rod. Then they started filling in the holes with concrete on top of that. That's the later part of the concrete block foundations that you see in the 70s. Those are your best concrete block foundations. In fact, it was the pouring of the concrete in these holes with the re-rod that led to the foundations that we know and love today, which is the poured foundation. Right? Now, if you see slab like this here in Des Moines, I don't know what it's like in the other areas, but the bottom photo, those are generally your earliest poured foundations that you'll see in the 70s, but definitely primarily in the 80s. We started going to the brick format probably in the 80s. nineties, and that's what we use today. The best thing about these foundations, and they did this with some of the clay tile ones too, is that they have a retention around the foundation, right? They have a water system. Right now, it's the black perforated pipe. It's buried in a bunch of pea gravel that goes around the foundation into your sump pump. They spray the outside with some tar type thing. That's when you see the black, very water retardant. These are your best foundations. Repel water, right? These are the best ones so far. Anybody have any questions on foundations?
Now, when they started bringing the tiling inside versus outside.
Yeah, they have a waterproofing system. I'm sure most of you have seen it, right? See them? The channels on the inside of the house. All right, the reason we don't do that on you don't see that in new houses very often is because that perforated black pipe's on the outside of the foundation. Do that now when they build the house. So if water comes down the outside, it goes into the pipe, it goes into your sump pump, it's out. Those older foundations that we just went over don't have that. You will every now and then see a clay pipe coming in from a house, and they have the old clay ones, but unfortunately those clay ones didn't hold up as well. They break, they shift, they crack. It's probably not working the way it's intended. So what do? Let's see if I can get through this part. Pretty sure I have an illustration of what we can pass. Maybe I don't. Oh, here it is. Now we chunk out the concrete in the interior. And we're putting that same black pipe down below the footings, the same pea gravel on the inside. We're concrete back up. We're putting in the sump pump, a discharge out. Now we have the same process in an old foundation. Water comes in, it goes to the channel, goes to your sump pump and out. Water's going to come in. Water's going to find gravity, and it's going to find its way to the lowest spot. A lot of times these are our basements that are empty cavities sitting in a hole. So in order to get a dry basement, this is what you're going to need to do. This will vary anywhere from probably $4,000 on the cheap end to $10,000, $12,000 on the expensive. Okay. These are very efficient in repelling water, keeping up dry. To answer your question, oh, you said when they start doing it. I was thinking the 80s. American Perfection, like Joe Frill and the Bill Frill and those guys, who've been doing it since the 80s. Army guys,
Yeah,
had that.
they're awesome.
That company, so before him. So that's what I know, but I don't know if Midwest Basement is doing something similar. I know American Waterproofing, I'm not pitching any company, they're just less expensive. Do their systems, are they the best systems? I would say no. But they do work. I mean, they do work, 20 years later. These Midwest ones that you'll pay twice for and seem to work a little bit more reliable down the road. Okay. Lots of filter. All right, plumbing. There's basically three types of plumbing that you'll see in our
Wood foundations,
wood foundations.
few and far between. But
I'm glad you said something about that. Let's go back here. Wood foundations you will see very, very rarely, but you'll see Minnesota. It's got a shit ton. They use them a lot of it. Now you'll see buyers kind of scare away from them because it's just unknown. You think about a wood foundation being however far in the ground, the moisture, how is that going to hold up? How does that not decay? Well, it's treated such that it doesn't. So if you were to dig up a wood foundation now, it'll look like the day they laid it. It's a better insulator than concrete. They're more energy efficient. And boy, if they last in Minnesota with the weather extremes up there, they'll hold up just fine here. That's about the extent of my knowledge. If you want to add anything to them.
Well, I just wanted the agents that are in here, if you ran across a listing that has a wood foundation, I would show it, I would investigate it, and it might be my listing. In my house. So don't walk away.
Yeah, find the literature on it. Find the literature on it. Give it to your buyer. Let them make the decision. It's not something they should be scared of. No. Plumbing. There's three types, maybe four types of plumbing that you will see in our area. First and the oldest is the galvanized stuff. Metal from the galvanized metal. Right? See what it looks like? Some houses give you the trifecta, and they have all three of the plumbing. They got galvanized going into copper, copper going into PEX, and it's just it's a beautiful thing. Now keep in mind that your plumbing consists basically of two things. There's your line coming in from the street, and then there's everything else from the meter up through your house. Now, you can replace all the guts of your home, rip all this crap out, go to PEX, go to copper, whatever you want. Usually it's PEX today. And you still won't pick up maybe the pressure you were looking for without changing out the main cover. But you have to know about galvanized, just a couple things. One, it corrodes. It corrodes in the middle of the pipe and it gets all sooted and crap, and it starts to restrict the flow of water. One thing you absolutely need to make sure of as the agent, that if you're buying a home and the buyer knows they've got galvanized, they're going to, as a plumber, we're going to change it out. Don't ever let utilities shut off on the house. You should do that anyway, of any house. But if you have galvanized plumbing and let's say the transfer of utilities didn't go through because you weren't communicating with the buyer that it needed to go through, so the water gets shut off, everything that's in that line, that the water itself was in the line holding back the crap, is now just going to fall in. When you go to shoot the water back up and to turn the water back up, all that crap is going to get dumped, going to go to your faucets. Now you have no faucets. Your line is even worse than it was because now all the gunk's there. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? That the water on is there's always water in those lines. It's keeping it open. As soon as that water shuts off, all that crap is going to collapse in the line. So it's important to make sure your utilities are transferred over. Next, you'll see copper, and there's nothing wrong with copper other than people stealing it out of your house. But you can imagine, like every joint, every turn has to be soldered. Copper's expensive. Every turn requires a good joint, and if it ever freezes, it pops. There's no give in copper at all. So if it freezes on you, or you're out of town, the furnace goes down, and it pops, it's tough. You almost have to turn on the line in increments to figure out what all the leaks are on. Okay. But if you're selling a home with copper, it's in good shape. They're great plumbing lines. If they're replacing the main, it's copper that they generally use. You can tell from the copper coming in, that's a wonderful thing. Because it's pretty expensive to replace your main water line. Next is PEX. This is generally what you see. A lot of it's white now. In the early PEX days, it was red and blue. You have a little key here. These things turn on and off, shut off the water. But PEX has been probably, I bet you plumbers love it. I'm not a plumber, but it flexes to bend it, pull it through. It's supposed to swell up to 1.5 its size before it actually breaks. So there's more give in it if it was to freeze or you're out of town or something that happens. All right. Any questions with the plumbing? The last thing I would say is some people have used little PVC lines for plumbing, and that's a whole bunch of hell no. Because every time you turn on plumbing or something comes on, you notice your plumbing line shake just a little bit. Boom. That joint in that PVC line blew like that. It works for drain lines, but every time you turn something on, if that shakes like it, you're eventually going to have a pop. Okay, that makes sense?
The county still allow those, but they used to.
I don't know. I actually usually you're doing yourself or something, or obviously it's okay working like in a water softener or something like that, but I don't think you want it for your. Now your drain lines are all made up of PVC, which are great. See that that kind of work, someone's went through a lot of work to expensive. So that's kind of what that looks like inside the walls, getting rid of all. What would have been there prior was probably galvanized or copper as well. Drain lines. Okay. You'll also see a lot of these drain lines going into cast iron, like a cast iron main drain, which is great. That's fun. Okay. If that starts to get corroded and rusted out, they will cut it out and put PVC, which we're using in new construction. And on a side note here, you can have PVC up top that ties into cast iron. However, you can't have cast iron up top that ties into PVC. Does that make sense to everybody? Can't have the weight of the galvanized on top of the PVC, but you can have it the other way. Excuse anybody? Everybody knows what I'm talking about? Okay. Sewer lines. Cast iron is what we used up until the 40s, 41. Cast iron works really well. It's not impenetrable. It's not completely fail state. They do rust out. They do need some descaling. They can split and pop over time. Okay. So just because you have a cast iron line doesn't mean, well, we shouldn't inspect it. You know, there could be problems. But generally, a cast iron line is a good line. The next one you'll see is the clay tile. The clay tile can be just as problematic as the Orangeburg, which we'll go over next. Clay tile is laid in these sections. They're actually laid in sections, 3-foot sections that break, that move, free roots, they crack. So the fact that someone says, "Oh, we have clay tile, it's not Orangeburg," again, maybe smart. Okay. One thing nice about the clay tile though is you can replace it in sections too. They'll measure out where the crack is, or whether they can dig down and just replace the section without having to do the whole line. Then we got Orangeburg. I mean, this is one of those things that'll kill a deal if we're not prepared. It's tar paper. They started using it in 1941 when World War II broke out, because the iron all went to the war effort, so they started coming up with this stuff. That was only meant to last 50 years. So, but they put it in all the way up to like 1963. So here we are. 1963 is more than 50 years ago, I can tell you that. So this is the thing that you'll be dealing with. Your sellers, if you ever want to touch with your clients, call them and talk to them about putting on insurance with HomeServe. Have a quick conversation with them about it. Send them a link. It's helpful, it's valuable, and it gives you a touch with your clients that you know what you're talking about. You can put water line coverage and sewer line coverage for like $90 a year, and it covers up to $10,000 per year with it. Some sewer lines can be up to 20,000 depending on where it ties into the street. So where it ties into the city, what the homeowner is responsible for. That goes across the street, you're in the $20,000 to $25,000 range to replace it. You got to tear up the street, we got to shut down the street, we got, so there's some money in that. If it goes to the street, to the curb, and you're going to get in the street at all, it'll be on the cheaper side.
I didn't think they covered Orangeburg.
Yeah, they absolutely
I've had
do.
to burn it down because of it.
What's that?
I've had the insurance companies,
HomeServe?
well, I don't know. In my mind, it was HomeServe, but it was several years ago.
We just had a claim on HomeServe with Orangeburg, and they cover it. They didn't cover it because of waiting for backup, but
I thought we just gullible.
yeah, they cover up to 10,000. Yeah, I did. To my knowledge, Orangeburg is not an exemption.
If there's any, if there's any problem with the Orangeburg, it's showing signs of wear or tear, that stuff, then they won't cover it. Like, no,
Maybe that's what mine was.
it's had last part.
Look at it. Has to back up. In my experience, I just had experience. They want to see it back up. HomeServe right now is working with this company called Zippity Line or whatever they're calling. They'll go out there and camera it out for them. Part of that $10,000 is used for them to explore it, and then from there. But Torgenson, not that I get on pitching anybody business or anything, but Torgenson is really well known to replace sewer lines. And he has a way to do it where he just kind of blasts the pipe through the ground. It's not big. So my last sewer bid, and this was the house that sits like It was 45 grand that fixed the sewer line. It is to do a new line blast. So it's half the cost of it. So.
Greg also does the main water lines too, coming into the house.
so there's a-
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, generally they're right next to each other, so if they're gonna replace one and you have a galvanized line, might as well go for expense replacing the water line. Like,
If you're represented,
what's that?
if you're represented.
Yeah, or it's your house and you wanna, you go in and you're getting ready to do it for yourself. All right, let's move to the electric. Anybody have any questions with plumbing or sewer lines? No? The big problem you're gonna have is when you do a sewer scope and you have an Orangeburg line, it is completely fine. It's like, it looks like it's working well, might have a little deli in one area, but for the most part, it's all intact. Because your buyer's going, shit. Orangeburg, it's not a matter of if, but when it goes out. Now you're the agent that's thinking, okay, I gotta negotiate something that's working. It's hard to ask a seller to replace something that isn't working. Well, for $90 a year, maybe I'd ask the seller to pay for 5 years of coverage of home service. Pretty affordable. Covers at least $10,000 claims a year for 5 years. Something to think about how to keep deals together.
Has anybody been, running into the lead base or the lead pipe letters?
Oh,
Yeah,
I just heard that. In
Yeah,
West
they're-
Des Moines?
They sent out a bunch.
Yeah, in West Des Moines. I'm like, I've never received anything like that, and I still didn't. But yeah, it was surprised. And they said annually they have to send you a notice that you could possibly and check for if you have lead pipes.
and if you do check and you do have it, what?
It didn't say anything in
Here's the
that.
question.
You're gonna
It
die.
just says that, yeah, it just said that the city was required to contact you, annually to make sure that you have tested for the lead in your pipes. And
Yeah,
I'm
they test the
surprised.
water. The reality in lead, most places, if you don't do anything to it, it's fine because it gets a cover on the inside like a corrosion and the lead doesn't leak out. If you do something to it, the lead does leak out. And if you change your water source, Lead Michigan, same thing happened up there because they changed the water source and it changed the chemical makeup. So that all went bad. But yeah, it's going to become a problem because they are now noticing people that have lead. So now that's going to start happening to be in sellers' disclosures. So we're talking about that.
It's a wood foundation.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's another issue we have to figure out.
Well, the knob and tube is the oldest shit that you're gonna see around here. That's the wiring there, the old tube, and of course, are the old knobs there on the left, and then the tube breaker panel there on the top right. Two big problems with this. First of all, this panel is probably not 100 amp. You really want 100 amp coming into a home. That's minimal. You still real estate long enough, we'll definitely sell a home that's only got 60 amp. Well, you think, of why would they only put 60 amp at the house by Moe Brothers? You gotta remember, they didn't have air conditioners 60 years ago. They didn't have high-end appliances. They had, different things. They have dishwashers, they have microwaves, fryers and stuff like that. Stoves, they were all gas. So you didn't need 100 amp. Now, if you build a home, it's a minimum of 200 amp, regardless of the size of it. So, well, there are minimum bills. So, but yeah, 200 amps a minimal that goes through with new construction and has been for at least 20 years, probably, if not longer. But the knob and tube also is very tough to chirp. Actually works for me.
It's in good shape.
Yeah, the big thing about the knob and tube is over time, changing out outlets, worked on over the last 100 years. A lot of those connections will start to fray, and the insulation around the wiring starts to fray. That's your problem. But generally, in the wall, it's as new as it was when they first built it. No one's touched it. Been in the wall for 100 years. So you'll also you'll see sometimes where electrician has updated the panel, but there's one knob and tube wire left. Why? Because it's in the attic or something. inspector sometimes with it. They want that terminated, one light bulb that's it. Yeah. So you'll run into that too. Now we get into the 50s and through the 70s, and we have these push-o-matics. Anybody ever had one of these? You know what I'm talking about? They're not bad. They're not grounded panels. You typically don't have grounded outlets either, which we're going to get to how to identify that. A little harder to buy breakers these days for this. This isn't one of those things where it's like, I have to update this panel, but your buyers probably should if they're going to be there for a while. We do have a couple panels that have been recalled. This is important to know on your listing appointments, so you can identify it with your seller. It's also important to know with your buyer, so it doesn't bomb your deal. The one on the bottom left here that has the X to it, that's your Federal Pacific panel. Right? Everybody know about those? No? It's okay to not know. It's okay to say, I don't know any idea what you're talking about. But both these panels have been said that something in the wire or something they have failed, and it's when that wire heats up, that breaker is supposed to flip and turn off. And something was going on with this particular panels where it wasn't doing that. It started fires in people's houses. I don't know how many. I've never heard of any personally, but enough to where they recalled the panel. The one on the right here, where you see the blue and the green and the red, all those breakers, that's what's called a Zensto panel. You'll see that in Norwalk. You'll see that in Grimes, homes built in the 80s. Okay. Federal Pacific panel, I don't know what year. That was more like a 20s, 30s, 40s panel. I'm not sure. I think it would have been after the Donovan too. So I don't know. Now, on your listing appointments, you need to talk to your seller about possibly replacing. Replace the panel and pull a permit like you're supposed to. They're going to make you bring the whole home up to code. They're going to make you take the meter outside. That's Des Moines code. I don't know what it is in Pella. I can't tell you Urbandale code or West Des Moines. So when I talk about code, I'm speaking about Des Moines code. That's what I primarily have dealt with. They'll make you take the meter outside. They'll make you update all the GFCIs. They'll make you put the whole home up to code. Right? GFCIs. GFCI stands for ground fault circuit interrupter. These are supposed to be in your water sources. That way, if you come in contact with water while these plugs are activated and there's a surge, it cuts the breaker. It interrupts the electric current so you don't get electric. Right? Important. This is what I was talking about, grounded versus ungrounded. Ungrounded are your 2 prongs. Grounded are your 3 prongs. Now you need a tester to understand whether it's grounded or not. Just because someone's putting a 3-prong out doesn't mean that it's a grounded outlet. However, it actually meets code to have a 2-prong outlet. What doesn't meet code is to have a 3-prong outlet that's ungrounded. Not that we have to get up the code on someone's houses, but it's important to know what it is. So if someone has replaced this into an ungrounded outlet because they want the convenience of the 3rd plug-in, that doesn't really meet code. They're supposed to ground the outlet. How do you ground an outlet that's not there? They take a copper wire, they thread it to the outlet, and they'll usually clamp it onto a water source like your copper pipe. That ground, okay? They can also try to ground it all the way back to the panel.
How much more expensive is it to go?
Expense-wise, you're not looking a lot, like
Well, why
maybe
would
8
somebody do
cents.
You know what I mean? This
Why
is
would
like-
someone-
Find in the ground. Find in the ground.
Why would someone go from 2 to 3?
No. Why somebody would do 2 in the first place?
Oh, well, they wouldn't do it new. It would just be replacing what's already there.
Oh.
And to put 2-prong in is because they don't want to go through the expense of grounding the outlet, which is probably about $120 an hour.
Gotcha.
So if they're going to do a whole house, it'd be pretty expensive.
I thought so.
You can also, if the city finds that a particular outlet is very hard to get to, almost impossible to thread that copper wire, they'll allow you to put a GFCI. as a ground. Okay. But again, you don't have to have grounded outlets to the code. You just can't show that you have one and not ground. So a solution to this is to just come up on your inspection addendum, is to change it back to the 2-prong, not grounded outlets. Right? It's cheaper. It's cheaper. They do have these adapters here, which my old house I owned, I used all the time. Fans or whatever, you know, your vacuum, TV, whatever. All right, let's go into siding. There's quite a bit of siding material you're going to see in our area. I'm just going to focus on the main ones. Masonite, any kind of wood product. This goes for cement board too, which I know is not wood, but it needs to be painted about every 5 to 7 years, 8 years or so, in order to keep weather out. Okay, any kind of wood product you have, if it doesn't have good paint on it, it's going to start to block out. And what you're seeing down here in the bottom right, I've really tried to highlight this lip here, because that is where you see masonite fail the most. It's like painters aren't getting up on that lip at an angle, at a 45-degree angle. So what happens is the water runs down, that's got a raw edge, that absorbs the water like a sponge. So if you're ever looking at the masonite homes, you start to see the sponginess on the ends, or they start to swell, especially around the nail holes and stuff. That's what's happening. Okay. It's unsightly. It doesn't look good. Up top here, we have more of a cedar shake, which is obviously not, it's a cedar product. My old house has a cedar on it. I love it. We painted it, but in the 20 years I've owned it, I've probably painted it 3 times, maybe 4. Why? Because the oils of cedar always loosen up the paint. I don't care how much oil paint we put on. The paint doesn't pull on it as much. So when you have real cedar that was actually cedar wood, and over time it's wrought out, now you want to paint it, just understand you'll have to paint it out every 5 years, not every 7 or 8. I obviously see a lot about vinyl siding as well. Vinyl siding is not all vinyl siding is not the same in the same way that roofs. There's a different mill to vinyl siding. There's a different thickness. Obviously, the more thick it is, the better it is, right? So when you see all the wavy crap like this, you're dealing with a very bad product. You're dealing with a bad install as well. These people that put up vinyl siding as well as wood, they have their nailers on a certain pressure so it doesn't go too hard and make that waviness. Have you ever seen the new construction homes where you're looking down the side of the brand new LP and it's really kind of wavy? It's what happened. Their nail guns weren't synced. Some of them were pushing the nails in too much, some of them were too far out, therefore it's wavy. Okay. One thing about the vinyl siding is just power wash it, keeping it clean. It does fade. They can paint it. Painters do have certain paint that adheres to vinyl, so it's not something that has to be replaced. If it's a faded out on you or something like that. You'll see the tie wrap or this tie deck wrapping is a brand. They have other brands, of course. That's a weather and wind guard. Is what that is. Okay, more of a wind barrier than anything. And they'll do that underneath all sides should have that. Tuck it up under the windows and everything else. That brick, we always say maintenance free, brick's maintenance free. That's not entirely true. Brick does need its care. It does need top pointed every now and then. Having a good mason in your back pocket is a good thing to have. They're not like they used to be. So it's kind of a lost art. And then cement board versus LP. Cement board usually has that raw brought up to it, where LP will sometimes have an eye channel or something in it. I can tell from the look and the grain of the two products. I don't know if that's evident to you guys as much, but it certainly is to me. Cement is a cement product. It's heavier. It's more dense. Not supposed to burn, but it does chip like this. And it does need painted every 7 to 8 years in order for it to hold its warranty. They have little flashing that goes underneath every joint here. That comes right up under this. There's a whole flashing here. They're not supposed to caulk these joints. They're not supposed to have a channel. I had a big deal with an inspector once, and I had to get the whole Hardy Plank crew out there telling me it's wrong. It's a big deal.
Well, when Hardy Plank came out, they wanted spacers.
They want space all in them.
They wanted
Yeah.
plastic butt joint spacers in there,
Spacers. They
or
don't
they wouldn't
anymore.
warranty it.
Yeah.
And then they went away from it, and then they're saying now no caulking either.
They don't want caulking. They want the water to run out of that. With the
When it was
plastic
new,
behind.
they were.
They want
joints
the
in
butts, they want the joints as tight as they can. But they need that flashing underneath for it to be warranted.
And that face nail would probably would go in.
That face down. And so, yeah, if you get it that close to the corner, or even like a mower hitting the rock at almost like vinyl, does, it'll chip it or whatever.
If you get ice damming or a spot that has moisture, it will stumble.
It will, okay. Some builders are big cement board, and some people like the LP. Some builders, right now, from what I understand, they're pretty competitive in price. Like what you can pay for. So
I have a question previous, back slide.
that's okay.
The term tuck pointing.
Yeah.
Or tuck pointing, what exactly does that mean?
Oh, God, that's a good question. So a mason, if they're gonna tuck point something, a lot of times you'll get these mortar joints. And you start to turn to sand or they're missing, they'll actually take a grinder, which is a circular saw, and they'll go into those joints and they grind them out. They take all the cement out of it. And they tuck point it with new cement. So they'll actually, almost like a cake, they have kind of like that squeezer, almost like a caulking gun. They put the mortar up, they let it sit for a few hours to dry up, not all the way. Once it sets up, they go back with a little tuck pointer and make all the nice little bevel, But a truly skilled mason, I've seen them do things like throw dirt in to make it discolored so it matches. If you got brand new concrete versus a mortar versus stuff that's 80 years old,
Right.
you're always going to be able to see it. Most of the time, you will. You'll almost see it.
Okay,
But you also see very bad do-it-yourselfer jobs.
okay,
Yeah.
I've seen, what the
Yeah.
heck is that?
No,
Okay,
yeah.
now I know.
Man, masonry is like one of those like passed down generations things, right? And it's just, and there's not as many people skilled at it. So if you ever know somebody that's good, we'll hold on to them.
If it matters, there is color in different colors.
Yeah.
Which makes it. Right.
Yeah.
To match stuff.
Sure. I mean, Steel mason. Aluminum, obviously, is something we're gonna see a lot of too. Aluminum can be painted as well. There's a chalkiness to it. If you run the can across it, there's a chalkiness to it. They're gonna spray this chemical on it called TSP with water. Get that chalkiness off, so paint will adhere to it, okay? But aluminum's great too, other than the fact that it dents. Yeah. If you get hail or something like that, it looks like a car where it just dents it. Okay. Windows. Oh, okay, we got quite a few windows. You guys should be able to look at a window and tell me what style of window, what type of window it is. The most common ones you're gonna see is a single hung and a double hung. As you can see here, as a single hung, it just means the bottom sash moves up and down. The top one is fixed. In a double hung situation, both sashes move independently. Does that make sense? Okay. Your double hung window is more expensive than your single hung. Now you have your sliders that slide back and forth. These are one of your more inexpensive windows on the chain of windows. And then of course your casement ones that roll in, roll out, those are on the higher end of your type of window. Okay. So in the hierarchy of like cost wise, it'd be casement, double hung, single hung, slider. Your least expensive window generally is your fixed one, the one that doesn't open. That's why you see a lot of builders. These
Great huge windows that you
Yes,
can't touch.
you can't open them up. They're, that's.
Ceiling to floor though.
Yeah. You'll also see builders put a lot of casement windows on the main floor, and they cheapen the basement by putting in the sliders in the basement. So they save money. Most of the time, you can find the brand of the window down here in the corner. Not all the time, but most time. People who are proud of their windows, put their name on it. Ella Anderson, to have Marvin Integrity, which is somebody else now, who they know. Windsor, is that Windsor now? Okay.
Shelter.
Shelter, yeah. So, have all that. Wood windows, you see, obviously up and through probably the nineties, the late nineties, you started to see. Oh, I didn't even say later than that, maybe 2000 to 2000. Started to see the movement from wood windows to vinyl windows. There's a good reason for that. The wood ones are more porous. They absorb more humidity, they dry out, so they shift on you. The wood ones shift on you. Shift, you have the double pane shift, you lose the gas inside the window, and you start to get some of that fog. See, this with vinyl windows too, it's not just a wood window. But with the fogging with the wood window, you get condensation, it starts to rot out your sash. So whenever you're looking at homes with your buyer, understand that the west and the south side, when it comes to siding windows, will always be your worst sides. That's the ones that's generally getting the worst sun and the weather. Walk right up to the window and look down. If you see black staining on the sash, we know we've had some moisture. It's probably beyond, and that might get you some more years, but it's beyond safe. If you see some light staining, well, shoot, you can paint them, you can sand them down, you can paint them, you can take matching stain, wear a glove, but run it over and match the stain, add some more protection to the window itself. Pella had windows from 98, I think, to 2003, that would be called. They're wood ones. All their sashes were rotting out. For a long time, they were helping homeowners put them back. Some of your expensive windows, like Anderson, are still wood windows. They're as expensive as can be, but they're cladded on the outside. You guys all know what I mean by cladded on the outside. They got the aluminum or vinyl channel around on the outside. It's almost like, yeah, it's keeping the weather off. Okay. Vinyl just doesn't absorb moisture and doesn't release much humidity, so they're just less shifting.
We had someone try to fix the base of our window, and the way they fixed it, they covered, there's a draining system at the base of your windows.
Yep.
They went ahead and they covered it, and they did that, and it ruined like the whole front of,
Yeah.
I mean, it just
Yep.
rolled and all
Yeah,
kinds
that's
of.
another great point that I don't really have on here, but it's worth noting is there's weeping holes
Yes.
in the windows, especially your vinyl ones. And over time, they can get dirty, they can get clogged. So you gotta, some of the windows you can pull out, and you can actually pull that vinyl channel out, clean it up, run down hot bleach water, put it back. But it is important to keep those little weeping holes open. The window, because water is coming in through the screen, down, your window's closed, but still ushering out. Now, things aren't there, that water's gonna sit. It's gonna sit there. Okay. Here's your wood windows here. How many people have seen these chimes? You know what I'm talking about here? The weighted, the counterweights. You go into an older home that was built in 1900 to like 1930, even to the 40s. You might see these weighted systems here. They're on a pulley. Window comes up, the chime goes down. It's a counterweight, right? A lot of times they have broke. The ropes become brittle. They're not in there anymore. So the window's very loose. They won't stay up, or or you have to put a stick in it to prop it up, whatever like that. And a lot of times you'll see these windows and they're in great shape. And I'll bet you 99% of the time, if you actually notice, there's a good storm on the outside of that, of those old windows. That's what's kept them in the shape, keeping the weather off of them. A good storm on an old window probably gives you about the same R value as if you popped in a brand new window. The only reason you pop in a brand new window is something that has good windows, not rotted, and has good storms. It's just more anything else. But if you do want to pick up some more value, these wood pieces with the skilled carpenter can pop that out and add some insulation in these channels, which you don't see it because they're covered, like right here on the sides. You don't see it. And there's these huge cavities that are just letting cold air. Stuff some insulation in that, plug back if you want to. That's what I was talking about with the windows are starting to rot out on. You're going to see these. That's gone. Nothing you could do here. Here, you might be able to stand down a little bit, paint it, put some new finish on it, extend its life. Right? Here's that condensation I'm talking about. Look at the windows for your people. Point it out. That'll bomb a deal. Inspector come in, tell you got $15,000 worth of windows that are wadded out. Better know. Just know right up front. That literally looks like my old house. My sore. New vinyl windows put in the old house. They would have had these windows originally. Turned into that. I think I just actually went over all that. Your vinyl window is a better window from the standpoint of our extreme conditions. They're very hot. It's very cold. Heating, cooling. We have two types of gas forced air furnaces you see primarily. You have your 92, 93+% efficiency furnaces. You'll always know them by the PVC pipe coming in and out of the furnace. If you see that, when it was put in, it was a high efficiency furnace, 92% or more. Now, a furnace starts to lose its efficiency as it ages, based on how it's routinely cleaned and serviced, as well as filters, exchange, and everything like that. So, but originally, if you see the PVC pipe coming in and out, that is bringing in fresh air and it's expelling carbon monoxide outside the home. Okay. Some furnaces you'll see, if you see this kind of metal flue, sheet metal flue coming out of it, that means it was an 85 to 80% efficiency furnace or less. First put in. They are cheaper to put in. Generally, you won't see people do this too much anymore unless the convenience of it. Taking the intake and the outtake of something new is problematic in some way. To know, for all of you agents that haven't been around a long time, I would plan on going on all your inspections. I would plan on being there for all of them. Walk around with the inspector, pick their brain, ask them questions. No one cares about their job, so when you ask them about it, they're very forthcoming with everything they know. And I think you can learn a lot from those inspectors. Why are you looking at the panel? Why are you unscrewing? What are you looking for? Tell me about the furnace. Why are you looking at the burners? Now, I was curious, so I learned all these things by asking questions. They're looking at the burner. They want to see the burners are all blue. So you kind of orange them at all. It could signal a cracked heat exchanger, which would be very unhealthy, killing the carbon monoxide. Okay. If you have a cracked heater, the furnace is gone. No repairing. The brand new furnace is what's needed. Okay. So when they got these little switches down here that they work on. They turn them off, right? Didn't you get charged like $90 one time when your kids were like really little?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. I always tell that story. Comes over. His kids were a little tired, probably 5 or 6, and couldn't get his furnace on like a day like today. He hired someone to come over, $90. So there's 3 things you want to look for when your furnace goes down. You can tell your clients if they call you. Number 1, check the breaker panel, right? Number 2, check the switch. And then number 3, go outside if it's been snowing and make sure these aren't covered up. These things have a detector in them that if the snow drift gets up over these, it can't dispel the carbon monoxide. It tells your furnace to shut down. So those 3 things: your breaker, the switch on it, which a little kid can hit, and then of course this would be the last thing. It was a big snow day. Okay. A lot of builders now are taking these up a little higher, but some of them are on the side of the home, and if you get a big blow on that side, you get one of those 4-foot drifts that can easily cover this up. Okay, then you can be their hero and not spend $90. Switch. It could happen to me too before I learned. I mean, shit. There are other. There are other heating elements. There are boilers, which I think we have here, we'll go over. There are mini splits, which people use to heat maybe a third story old house or a Four Seasons room. There's electric baseboard. So there are some different types of heat. Water heaters, primarily see two types of water heaters is your stand-up 40 gallons is what is standard. Okay. So if you need something smaller, like a 30 gallon, you think you pay less, but you're not. You're gonna pay more because it's not standard size. 50 gallon, of course, is a little larger. You're gonna pay more. But on older houses, you'll see where they actually flue outside. They flew into like a wall or flew into a stack that goes up. Carbon monoxide's coming out of this. This thing right here has to have a 1-inch rise every 3 feet in order for it to flue the carbon monoxide properly. If you have any kind of negative where it goes down, like this one on the right, I don't know if you guys can see that or not. It's a huge health issue. Carbon monoxide could back up, and then, that's what killed that family in Mexico 10, 12 years ago. It wouldn't have been long. Now, Mexico doesn't have basements. This thing is in a closet. Carbon monoxide backs up. They all fell asleep, never woke up in the whole family. Generally, these are in the basements of our houses. It wouldn't be as fast or as quick. You start getting headaches and stuff like that. But this is a no. This is a no. Okay. Now, if you see a new one of these and that's done, man, that means the tech did that, knew what they were doing, putting the family's life in harm, making shit. So now we have these power vendors, and much like the furnace that has the intake and the outtake, these water heaters for a little bit more money, $200 or $300 more, will actually power vent all the carbon monoxide outside. Okay. Also on these water heaters, we have what's called a pressure relief valve on the side of it. That water heater gets too much pressure, it's designed to release. And those valves are originally kind of up high and on the side of the water heater. They need to have an extension relief that's within a few inches of the floor. Why? Because if it ever does release pressure, it's spitting hot water, it's spitting steam or hot water. They don't want someone to walk by it and be right about it. They want extension relief so it hits the ground. Does that make sense? Very cheap, but very cool to know when you're walking around with your binders to point these things out. Makes you look like the professional, like you should be. These are these instant water or wall packs. I don't know how much they cost. They're more expensive, but they're instant water. Has anybody ever turned on their hot water and they have to wait a day and a half before it gets hot? How many gallons have you lost? This is the instant hot water. You turn on hot water, you have hot water. Okay. Take this. There you go. Here is your boiler. You'll see them a lot with homes over by Drake. They have these 40, not all of them have 40 things, but 40 ones there. Some of them have left them, even though they're not in operation anymore, more as like a decoration or nostalgia to the past, which I think is really cool. But if they do work, just know, boilers are as many people that work on them. So if you ever need solar in emergency, it's a little harder. It's very hard, I hear, to keep temp at a like a comfortable level. It's a little too hot, a little too cold, but it is efficient. Like as far as like heating your home, it's lower cost than a gas furnace. I'd also say that keep in mind that your furnace is here. Your air exchange, your AC is right here. This is your air core. This uses the same ductwork. Your central air uses all the same ductwork. Well, here we don't have ductwork. There's a good chance you don't have AC. If they do have AC, a lot of times they're coming in from the attic, or something like that. Okay. Lead-based paint. Does anybody have any questions about a boiler? No. I sold a house that they put a brand new boiler in instead of doing it. They put brand. You can still get a brand new boiler put in. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. Good brand. Almost every major contractor is still there. Probably more expensive to work on. Is it an
expensive to work?
HVAC guy you call or is it a plumber?
They're more expensive to work on. Seems to me like there's aren't as many moving parts in this.
You're not gonna work on it as much.
Okay,
It doesn't need as much maintenance and cleaning and upkeep. Yeah, a HVAC company that has both plumbing and HVAC outfit is you're gonna be your best friend. Because you're gonna need both.
and that's why it's more expensive. I got 2 techs working on it instead of 1.
It's usually one tech. It's just,
Especially.
yeah, it's a more specialized field. There's not as many of them skilled in that trade.
Yeah, so supply and demand, if we call it thinner, they're gonna,
We just.
But am I
redid
good?
one
Am
of
I
the
right
things.
though that there are less things to do? Like
Yeah,
to
there-
maintain it.
A lot less maintenance. You're not changing filters. You're not cleaning it as
And
often.
things don't, there aren't things to break either.
Not the same moving parts, I guess, but not too much. Not a lot of moving parts. There's no fan. There's no fan.
Yeah. Well, we're constantly looking for lead. I mean, lead is, something you should be able to identify pretty. The alligator cracking nature of what lead does as a drying agent kind of always looks like that or this. Now, the 30 years I've been doing this, I've never known anybody to get lead poisoning. You know, so how dangerous is it? If you're working with the city of Des Moines, like on a rental or anything like that, they are going to look at all the chewable surfaces of the home. And 2 things have to happen. Either 1, you have to sand it down to bare wood and they have to come back and see it, or you can paint over it, or 2, you can wrap it with like a roof. But in order to test it, they actually have hire somebody to X-ray. They can X-ray. It's not just a chemical, in which you can. Your inspectors will put a chemical on something. If it turns color, it has red. The city won't allow you to do that. You gotta go like deeper. But you'll see these on outside, generally, outside older houses, in the window jams. Obviously, you're not supposed to eat it. It's harmful to kids and pets because I guess it's sweet. Tasty. Oh.
They
Yeah.
said, eat everybody in the household. You know.
A little of my coffee. So pets and children eat it because they don't know better, or you have a teething toddler that's putting their mouth on the surfaces, and then of course you can get brain damage from lead. Asbestos. Asbestos comes in generally 4 different areas. You see asbestos tile, you see asbestos tape, you see asbestos siding, and you see asbestos stacks that are going up that your heater and your water heater tie into. They go all the way up through your house, all the way up through the roof. Asbestos is a fire retardant. That's why they use it for that way. The heat of your carbon monoxide being expelled from your homes is going up through an asbestos stack.
When did they stop using?
Good question. I don't know.
In the 60s.
You generally don't. I can just tell from age of homes. Usually the 50s are about where you stop seeing.
Oh, so in a house in the 80s, I'm not gonna have to worry about.
No. This is what the tape looks like. Now keep in mind that asbestos in its whole form is not harmful. It is harmful when parts of it start to fray, you get those fibers in the air, you breathe in those fibers that can be cancerous. So a lot of people will tell you here just to take some of that reflective tape and go around it, seal it down. That way the fibers can't, rather than trying to tear this off. Like if you were going to try to tear this off, you wouldn't do that. Get an asbestos team in here, they cut it in different areas, wrap it in bags, they need hazmat suits, sealing off every end of the house so your fibers don't get in the air. I mean, it's a big deal, So a lot of people will just take this on themselves and just seal it, wrap it so it's sealed down. I don't want to give any advice on that one way or the other. That I think that's something that they explore and see. You have this tile here,
It was banned in 77.
I didn't expect you to tell me.
banned in 77.
Spray.
Sure. So
That'd be a good
1977 is when it was banned. Which they must have looked at lead the same way, because lead was banned in 78. Yeah. Here's what the tile looks like. And again, in its solid form like this, no problem. Starts to chip up like this, we have a problem. Now, if you can and they want to redo it, I'll go LVP, whatever they're going to do, go right over it. don't sit there and break it up. But if they are gonna break it up, they need to bring in a proper asbestos team to make sure it's done properly.
But you
So a home
can,
like that, I mean, no, the one that has the chips. You just go right there. Yeah, I mean, what's in the air is in the air. I'd probably take care of that piece, get it out of the way, but I just go right over it with LPT. Okay. There might be some floor leveling stuff they need to fill in here, so it's a smooth, there's no like dip in your LVP or something, but yeah, I'll go right over this and seal everything down. So, 'cause I got one going right now that has chips. Yeah, chips. You'll know it's usually asbestos tile, but it's small. It's like 8 inches instead of 12 inches, right? And then your asbestos siding is this. Remember my first house on Fort? Yeah. We were scraping the bait. Probably.
Yes.
Probably dying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I spent a whole week with a hole saw, cut holes in the side of mine, top and bottom, put an insulation in it all.
You know, asbestos?
Yeah.
right on time, right on
Yeah,
time.
Get a third nipple.
Hey, how do you know that?
Gave Toby. Oh, shit. Okay.
But they are, the encapsulation on tile is considered good repair.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad I'm getting good info there.
Oh, no, I was a question. I was
No,
asking.
I listen, you think, I know what I know.
Because I've been
and things
told both
change,
ways.
and, someone has some
So
other.
he's saying that it is considered good, but.
Yeah.
I don't know if it is or not. I've been told that encapsulation on stacks, perfectly fine. Paint. Whatever, right? But tile flooring, you want it done. I don't know. I've just been told that way.
I've been told to seal everything down,
But that's how,
but that's why I just want, I said,
I know
like,
most of
if you're gonna seek advice and your buyer, go get the experts and have them, have them do it. About foundations, they are a problem, right? Not all of them are straight. There are ways to fix them. These are some things that you'll be walking through a home that you'll see. And it's important to be able to tell your buyer what it is, First of all, down the bottom, you'll see what these are called I-beam supports. They're not really made to correct the walls, though. They are made to reinforce structural integrity. They're made to reinforce the wall. I love these in the concrete block foundations where they have the pylon that we're talking about, the inferior concrete block. Because what is happening with that basement is there's not enough support. The I-beams come in, they lag them down into the concrete floor, they lag them into the joist. It will support that wall. Give it the support it's going to need. It won't correct it, but it won't allow it to move anymore. So if you don't have a wall that's completely out of whack, it's just slightly bowing. I like the I-beams. I think they're probably about $600 a piece, each one. And there's some walls you have to do like 10 of them. So it can be costly, right? These right here, top left and top right are the same. They're anchors. One's a view of what's going on inside the house. One's a view of what's going on outside the house. I have mixed opinions on these, but they're personal opinions. I don't know, based on my experience with them as well as, asking around. But this will, in theory, correct the wall. What he's doing here is he's tightening this lug nut here that they'll leave there at the house, and you go along every year and you tighten it. And just slowly, this little metal bar right here comes out, and it's got a huge plate on the other end of that, grabbing her. If you're tightening it, it's pulling the wall straight, okay? Both of these generally carry a warranty. That's transferable. Anchor walls at Winterset's been around a long time. They're not the only ones that do anchor walls, but they're probably the longest tenured company here. Those warranties generally are transferable. Okay? So you can almost see the little bit in this wall. If you really look close, you can kind of see a slight bit. That's the slight bend I'm talking about with the items. If you want to correct the walls, you gotta probably go to the person.
We pulled the wall 3 inches over time on a replay.
On a reading, okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Because anything over like 1.5 inches, 2 inches, they say it's a failure.
I mean, we did it, and I haven't seen it years later, but I gotta think it's gonna You know, unless you've got the re-rod and the concrete, you're putting it in one of the pilaster walls,
Yeah,
and it fail around it.
that's what I worry about the anchors over time.
Yeah.
You got such a stability in those points, what happens around it?
Well,
What's the
and
price?
I lost the fight, or he lost that sale because the wife just couldn't get past how ugly it was. She was like, they did all of this, and then there's a big, huge,
Big both.
yeah, she was like, it's ugly, I'm never gonna be happy with that. I'm like, all right, let's move on then.
You gotta do it over time.
Yeah. Yeah, and you always want access to it. So if you want to finish, in order to fix a basement, sometimes you gotta do this. And then you gotta do the waterproofing along. I'm telling you, like, to do that, to do the beams or the anchors and waterproof, you're 15, 20 grand in your basement of something that really doesn't give you a lot of value unless you finish the basement. If you do finish the basement, you can hide the beams because they're like studs. These you probably should leave access panel to, so you can have access to them. All right, that's all we got. Trying to think if I missed anything. You guys have any questions? I know it's kind of pretty early. I talk fast? Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Oh, we love that.
Yeah.
We want to get to the point, make sure we understand right away.
Okay, cool. Is there any problems about, when you're looking at houses and, anything you've seen that you want to go over that maybe you weren't aware of? A lot of agents, if you don't have my number in your phone, put my number in your phone. You can always take a picture of something and text to me, like, what the heck is this? I know what it is. I generally do.
I have a question.
Sure.
It's a really unique situation, but I had a client that was looking at an investment property, and in the basement, we didn't end up going with it, but in the basement, they put paper plates on covering the entire ceiling. And I asked the agent, I was like, why did they do that? And they said that the seller never lived there, so they don't know, because it was like their parents or something.
It's a 16-year-old art project.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I kind of thought it would be like leaking, like to see where watermarks would be, but it was just covering the entire ceiling.
Yeah, probably not for water, because if you're looking up at water will always drop.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for water, just look for the drip, I don't know. I was almost thinking almost like maybe they're playing their music in some kind of like a sound barrier, but he's probably right. It's some 16-year-old there that's.
Or it's another DIY project, and look at my finished basement.
Every panel's got
Yeah.
crinkly
It's probably a
edges.
16-year-old that got into the cat and didn't have anything better to do.
Yeah.
I could have stayed decent.
Yeah. But you guys should be able to walk up to the homes, meet your buyer there outside, shake and tell them, hey, listen, I'm going to point out all the good, the bad, the ugly as I see it. I want you to know everything I see. While you guys are focusing on updates and space and whether your family will, move and live here well, I'm going to present the home to you from different eyes. And that's what builds. Every buyer wants trust and confidence when you meet them. They want to be able to trust you. And some of that is going through this. Because if I'm volunteering all this information and I'm telling you we have asbestos, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, this guy's not just trying to sell me. He's trying to educate me. And that builds trust when you're not just the sales person. And of course, the confidence is being able to look at where they're at, where they're trying to go, and knock down all the obstacles that lie in their way. Paint a playbook of getting them to where they want to be. So when you have the trust and the confidence of people, and sometimes we have to do it quick. Is it an open house? Is it a Zillow lead or Realtor.com lead or some sign lead you've never met? It wasn't a referral. They don't know you from Adam. You got to try to build trust and confidence with them. That's the name of the game. This is a very good way to do that. If you can master the components of a home.
Well, I used to do all of that. Then I was told to stop it because I come across as an expert.
I was told the
There I
same
opened
thing.
myself up for liability.
I was told the same thing when I started real estate. And I think that's a bunch of horse shit. I think you can always
I
say,
swallowed it, so I stopped.
well, I was told the same thing, but there's something to be said about knowing your product.
Well,
There's something to be said, like, if I'm selling cars, and I know everything about Toyota cars. I'm not a mechanic, but I know how the car was made. I can tell you, we had a mutual friend that kind of made me rethink this from what you were told and what I was told and how I conduct now. We had a friend that sold boats down in the Ozarks, and he knew everything about boats. He knew where the rivets these things came from, the made, the leather. They knew every stitch of the boat. And I was watching him explain this to me like I had the money to buy it. You know, and I was wasting his time. But I was so impressed with how he knew what he knew about this boat. I'm like, I know all this stuff about houses. Why am I not doing this about houses? So I started changing my mindset. I said, listen, I'm not an inspector. Whatever home you buy, you're going to have a chance to do an inspection. Like, I'm not opening up the windows. I'm not getting in your attic. I'm not testing your outlets. Someone's going to do all that. We don't have time for all that. I'm not licensed for all that. But the good, the bad, the ugly, as I see it, I'm going to point it out to you. I'm going to try to educate you on things. And they start to have fun. Like, they come in, maybe it's the 8th home on the second tour we've seen, and they start saying, that's asbestos, isn't it? I'm like, yes, it is. They start having fun learning and be able to identify stuff too.
I've heard that about home inspections. In fact, Sir Angelis had said that, but I have always told people what I think. And I also preface it with, have your own inspection. I've never been sued.
Yeah.
And it's been 38 years of telling people what I think.
Yes, dude. And I lead with that
No.
most of the time. I'm not an
No, I was
inspector.
just told to not do it, so I stopped.
I'm not an expert. This is what I see.
We're going to ask you, like, how do you know so much about houses? And you're like, well, I've been doing this 50 years. I've been doing this 47 years. I've been doing this 30 years. I've been doing this 20 years. I've been a part of a lot of remodels, a lot of builds, a lot of, collect a lot of information along the way.
Thanks for doing this. I'm impressed with your knowledge. I thought you were just a south side Italian. Well, I love state.
Both can be true at the same time.
But how do you handle it? I know how I handle it, but how do you handle it when you've done all this? And then you say, but I'm not an inspector. And then they say, oh, I've got somebody. And it ends up being Uncle Albert or maybe an inspector that you've had some issues with in the past. Legally, are you concerned about what you say? Okay.
I don't really, Uncle Albert's going to be there. I'm going to be there with Uncle Albert. Because Uncle Albert may or may not know his shit.
Yeah.
And we're always going to keep it like friendly. Remember, whoever that person is, trust Uncle Albert.
Yeah.
So it's important that me and Uncle Albert have a sharing of ideas, not a confrontation of who's right, who's wrong.
Right, I was gonna tell you, your Uncle Albert's just.
Well,
hires, I'll pay for your inspection.
it's happened. I tell you, I was representing a client up the north side of Beaverdale. They had replaced Hardy Plank siding. They replaced their home. And the inspector came there and said, he needs to redo it and caulk all those joints. And so we had, we said, I don't think that's right. So I called my guy who actually is the rep for Hardy Plank here in town. I went to school with his older brother. He sells all the Hardy Plank here. His name's Matt too. I called Matt. Like, hey man, will you come take a look at this for me? Like, he went and looked at it and he goes, the way he wants you to do it with what you want, that is done 100% correct. So he went through and typed out a letter for me as the rep of Hardy Plank saying we were right. And he had to eat shit. I mean, the inspector, they're not
licensed.
They have general knowledge of houses, but they're not experts in any field. Whenever they see something that's troubling or they're not sure about, they're always going to recommend you seek a profession. They see something in a basement, they say, hey, I recommend a structural evaluation. Hey, I see some orange in the light of the burning of the furnace. I recommend an HVAC specialist. That's all they're doing. So we got the Hardy Plank specialist and said, hey, you're wrong. This guy was, I tell you, he was around longer than me because the first inspection I ever went to, it was with the brokerage, took us on a field trip, much like I do today. That was 1996. It was down in Sherman Hills. This is back in Sherman Hills where you're walking down there like everything's boarded up. You're like, what are we doing down here? Like, it was before.
And you were carrying.
Yeah, before the gentrification in Sherman Hills. This guy has been around that long. So yeah, I mean, it's important to be there sometimes.
And at least let them do their thing and then show up and see what and review their process. So that but yeah, it's unfortunate that they're not regulated. didn't get it.
Yeah.
It
When
looks-
when it's nice out, you should be walking around the house looking for low grade, is there positive grade, is there, top plane, is, just all those things.
Morning's class lawyer said they're working with
Yeah.
legislature, trying to get inspectors licensed.
Yeah.
Well, at least you get, at least you can take it away.
Yeah, they should do that license. And they should have insurance that covers their mistakes, right? It goes to the cost of.
A little more than an inspection, so.
Something you may consider adding to your foundation section that I learned from a home inspector we use a lot. Is when we get up to a home usually or another property, we walk around the house and see if the grade slopes toward the house or away from the house. And we see if the gutters and the downspouts are doing their job and diverting water away from the house. If they're not, you go in the basement and you look, if there's a wet spot in the basement, usually that's because there's a low spot in the yard. And so that's something I look for all the time.
Yeah.
And they'll put it up, have a photo of them waterproofing the inside of a basement. But if those two things are done correctly, if the
Yeah,
water
you
slopes
always-
away and
To Doug's point, you always go through the cheaper things first, which would be, are the gutters even clean? Do they have proper extensions getting water away? Do we have flat grading against the foundation where water's just gonna sit? Or do we have a positive grade? Those are things that are going to be on the cheaper end of things. A load of dirt's $350. Sure, get the wheelbarrow and shit around, but it's not expensive. So hitting positive grades, having water properly funneled with your gutters the way they're supposed to be, that's first and foremost. If we're getting a trickle of water